Good evening. My name is Brittany Slack. Welcome to Beautiful Soul Inc. I thank you all for being able to just be here and tune into this interview. Today I have Miss Rhonda Rae here to speak with us. If you can just introduce yourself to everyone who's listening.
My name is Rhonda Rae Beiswinger, but I go by Rhonda Rae. It's my middle name, and so it's much easier. And so, yeah, I was always kind of embarrassed of that middle name, and it's kind of grown on me in the past like 10 years. So, I have a 30-year-old son, and then I have a granddaughter who's 5. And I'm in commercial real estate that pays my bills, but my heart and what I do is serving God throughout all of it. So that's been my passion, and the call has been there my entire life. But more importantly, it was the spirit of encouraging others that has always been in me. And yeah, and I moved back here from Los Angeles probably 13 years ago. So it's been a while. And I love Indianapolis. I know I came back for a purpose, and I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Thank you for tuning in and being able to come out today. I am grateful. Like when I read the 10 pages that you had sent me in an email, I was really encouraged and blessed. And so I'm excited to see what people are able to gain from this interview and learn about their self and even who God is in this interview. What is your story and what events shaped who you are today?
We all have a story, right? And when you say, what's your story? Goodness, I was married to, my parents were very young when they got married. They were 15 and 17. They had my older brother and myself I was born in Lincoln, Nebraska. My father was in the Air Force. Shortly after I was born, my father and my mother had gotten divorced. They had came back to Kendallville, Indiana, where my parents were from. And so I was brought here to Kendallville, Indiana, and it's kind of a little bit of a blur because I don't have a lot of answers there, but my mother had left us. And so my father divorced us. My mother had custody of my brother and I, and she left us at a babysitter's and never came back. And I said, that's when the word abandonment was literally brought into my life. Ultimately, kind of created the person that I am today was through that abandonment. My aunt and uncle had gotten custody of my brother and I. That was my mother's brother. And that wasn't, it had its own set of challenges, if you will, where I unfortunately experienced physical abuse, mental abuse, and then some molestation that had gone on for about a year. And at this time, I was second grade. Meanwhile, my father had gotten remarried to a woman in Fort Wayne, and they had started their own new family with 2 children and whatnot. My aunt, unfortunately, was in a car accident and was killed. They could not take care of anymore. So my father stepped in and got custody of my brother and I. So there was a lot of different emotions going through there. I kind of talk about, wow, I was unfortunately excited that my aunt was in a car accident because I felt that the abuse would stop. So I had guilt, like, oh my goodness, how could I feel like this? Because and then guilt rushes in. So now I've got abandonment and I've got guilt. So my father takes us in, my brother and I, and being a stepchild or being a step parent, I'm sure is not easy. And as an adult, I know this now, but I believe that my brother and I kind of really put a damper on my stepmother's relationship with my father and their perfect family. Unfortunately, I knew the routine all too well. I would experience some physical abuse and the verbal abuse. And sometimes I always say that the physical abuse, you can heal from it, but then the verbal is the stuff that you kind of as a soundtrack that you play over and over in your head. And those are the words that we repeat. And that's how I always feel that the enemy kind of takes you back to those abusive situations and just plays that soundtrack over and over again. So unfortunately, I said I knew all too well I could be the perfect young lady, the perfect little girl, the perfect daughter, the perfect whatever perfect was. I was going to try to be that, all to gain somebody's love because I so desperately was thirsty for it. And the thirst is real. I said,
That is, that is. And
right? I mean,
when you talked about, like, even going back to when you said the abandonment piece, you speak about when your mother left your brother, and you, how do you see like that abandonment spirit? I don't know, like, does it carry with you today? Or you talked about the soundtrack, so like, how does it carry with you today? And you see it resonate or pop up in your life?
well, I didn't think, when you're walking out life in a survival mode, you're thinking, oh, I went through that, but I survived, so I'm good. Oh, I went through that heartache and pain. I survived, I'm good. But what we're doing, or what I did, I kept suppressing it. And I found out, of course, later on in life, because you survived something does not mean that you've been healed from it. So that abandonment issue that I struggled with, which, let's be clear, abandonment means, okay, they must not love me. I'm not worthy of love. I'm not worthy of all these great things that we're told that we are worthy of, right? And I mean, so it's manifesting in the choices of men that I date. It's manifesting in the relationships with just females that I have. I'm a people pleaser. I've got to make sure everybody's happy. And I'm doing all of that at the expense of losing myself. Like, I become physically and mentally exhausted trying to appease and please everyone within my reach, within my circle, within my friendship, the men that I dated. And it was all being controlled and manipulated, right? And I'm thinking, oh, I can love them through this part, or I can love them so much they'll love me back. So that abandonment piece that I know now was the root. It's like I feel like we're all broken and damaged in some form or fashion. No, there's only one perfect man that I know, and that his name is Jesus, right? So we all have heartaches and pains and triggers and things and trauma, things that we've lived and survived, but we may not have been healed from it. And so that abandonment root, I speak a lot now that's the root that other things kind of branch off of it, whereas there becomes insecurities. There's that unworthiness. That's looking for love in all the wrong places. Oh boy, I looking for love in all the wrong places, feeling that I can get in these relationships with men and I'm going to be that woman that just loves them no matter what. They put their hands on me, but they love me, or they cheat on me, but they love me. And God is never going to have us bring us to relationships to be able to be abused all over again.
Even going back, looking at it from another perspective of, do you feel as if they were going to fulfill something inside of you or fill this void inside of you? When we talk about, okay, let's say for example relationships, how it's just like all this stuff layering up, and you becoming an adult and you're carrying something on your back, all of this of years of pain or years of wanting, I don't know, to really be healed, but you probably didn't necessarily chose that yet, at least yet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yet. And that's just it, Brittany. I was a runner. So what did I do? When I was living in Fort Wayne, I was modeling, and I was in some commercials, and I was like, oh, modeling's my area of expertise. I'm going to model. I'm going to LA. I'm going to go to, I wasn't an actor, but I knew I could model and I could do commercials and that sort of thing, not acting. So I ran so far away from here. And I said I would never come back to Indianapolis, or Fort Wayne, rather. And I ran. And again, searching for love in all the wrong places. I went out there, and of course I got into modeling, and it was so incredibly challenging because I was very naive. I was very, very green. I was believed that everybody was good, and nobody would want to hurt me. How could they take advantage of me? I don't have anything to take advantage of. And, so I was very naive. So going out to Los Angeles, I became a makeup artist when modeling didn't go over so well. I wanted to stay in the industry. And so I got into makeup artistry and worked at South Coast Plaza. And it's my life. It's kind of, I laugh because it's like I was God's faithful even when we're not faithful, because when I tell you I was in the streets, ripping and running, I was at VIP, I was in the clubs, I was doing this, I was on the red carpet, and I was living the life. So I thought, I'm living all this material. Everything was material. Everything was material. I was dating guys, that would buy me the world, but then cheat on me. Buy me the world, but then put their hands on me. And I'll never forget. I would be like, I still praying. I would still pray. I was raised strict Catholic, private grade school and private high school in Fort Wayne, and church 3 days a week at least. And I still didn't have a relationship with God. I look back on that and I'm like, oh my goodness, like that's absurd. That's just crazy. But I'm out there in LA and I'd be praying and I'm like dating these men in relationships, having the material, driving the Benz and doing these things that I thought was a great life. And I was like, I'm just going to love these guys and they're going to see that I love them. They're going to love me back and I'm going to feel whole. I'm going to feel complete. And God said to me in my spirit, he says, what makes you think you can change them when I haven't been able to? I said, humble pie, girl.
Wow.
Seriously, like I think back on that and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna be that ride or die. I'm gonna love them and they're gonna see my love. They've just been hurt and I'm gonna help them. Like that's my responsibility to take that on, right? Because I've taken on so much pain. What's in somebody else's pain? I can take pain on too, right? Taking it on. And when I heard that, I was like, it shut me down to the point where like, wow, I can't love them like that. If God hasn't even gotten their attention. So I had I had that epiphany in LA. I had my son and my son was born in Los Angeles. And I always tell people that my son saved me. I was always kind of like the black sheep of the family, and now I always say it's set apart for purpose. You ever feel like you don't fit in? Like your whole entire life, you're like struggling.
It's a reason for that. It's a reason for that you're not fitting into the places you want to be. You think you want to be in those
yes,
but you don't want to be in. And it's because God has something over your life that he's calling you beyond what the world is already doing. So it's like it's a hard pill to swallow when you first notice that you're set apart and you're like you have this like going back the epiphany moment, like, oh my goodness, like that's why this I was able to be in this room or people looked at me this way or because that's not where God wanted you in the first place. And there's something he's calling you to do. And we can't be going to the distraction.
Yeah, because all I keep thinking about, as you go back and you look backwards and you're in the midst of it, you're like, you can't see it. I mean, I'm trying to believe it. I always believe that there's got to be a silver lining in everything. And I was always that positive person to always encourage, but behind closed doors, the struggle was real. Behind closed doors, I'm boo-hooing and like, what am I doing wrong? Am I being punished? It was like, I must not be a good person. I kept thinking, and if the world wasn't punishing me, I was punishing myself because it was a familiar feeling. It was so easy to feel that instead of getting excited to have the hopes, even though I would tell myself that it has to get better, to believe it and to walk it out, two different things.
What was the turning point, just to go off of like what you were saying, you came from LA and Fort Wayne and you're going through all this different, experiences of going, through different relationships and different experiences, verbal abuse and physical. So would you say that the pain had kind of like pushed you towards God? Like what was that moment? Because you said your relationship with God was not necessarily set, always. But how did you get to the point where it's like, okay, God, I choose you at this point?
When I tell you what, I thank God for grace and mercy because, he's just been there. He's a gentleman. He's never going to be that loud. I'm here. He wants to be invited into your life. So literally after 9/11, I was working in the commercial real estate industry in Los Angeles. And the whole format of our organization had shifted and changed and things. And when I tell you, God, when God is in it, he will order those steps. I want a free airline ticket. Come on now, to come back home to get some interviews. Okay. Then I got a severance package. Wasn't up eligible for a severance package, but God. I mean, it was coincidence after coincidence. It was God. He's still waiting. He's still waiting. He's still blessing me. I'm still not knowing
Wow.
it.
Wow.
I'm still not knowing it's him. But it was like I came back to LA, worked at Simon Property Group, and literally I was on the plane going back to LA and got a call that I got the job. It was like it was God giving me the opportunity to bring myself and my son back here. And just I didn't know it was God yet. This is now I'm looking back. So coming to Indianapolis, I was all excited. I was very excited to run again because I was tired. I was tired of the beat down. I was tired of people smiling in my face and hurting me every chance they could get, hurting me. And it was just crazy that pain again is real, but I knew what to do. We just suppress it, put on a mask and keep it moving. And act, positive Rhonda again, how she shows up. But I was running back here, a place that I never thought I would come back to. I was running to get back here. And I was very excited because I felt in my spirit, I felt that, there was something great that was going to come out of this coming back here to Indianapolis. And I knew that I was coming back for a healing. And, and I didn't even know what that looked like, let alone how that was going to be accomplished. I mean, what did I need to be healed from? I survived, right? I'm good. I'm so good. No.
It's that survival thing that have your mind thinking that you're good.
Yeah.
It really will.
Yes.
It really, I know that. I know that feeling.
Yes. I'm just like, I'm good. I got this. I got this, So I come back here and I always say when the enemy's not attacking you, he's attacking your loved ones. He's attacking your family, your significant other, that he is a busy man. And when he wasn't attacking me, he was attacking my son. And it was very hard for my son as a Black man to come back to India. In LA, it's a melting pot of everything. His father was in the industry, so he was around. He had a glorious life, my son did, and he didn't know the struggles that I was having behind closed doors. And so I always said that everything that is glitter is not gold. And so he was like thinking I took him from this, the land of milk and honey to this crazy place called Indianapolis, Indiana, where it's cold and, everything is still black and white. It was so, so crazy because I was like, oh, 20 plus years have passed. It's going to have changed and everything. And,
Right.
Bible Belt, there's going to be God loving people and, all this great thing. And it's like there was such a separation still. There was like, and it was heartbreaking to see the things that my son had to go through school. But I was like, okay, we have to be the bridge. I always called my son and I the bridge. I said, we got to be the people that are speaking for the people. I said, we have to be part of the solution. So my son experienced a lot of things. I went to the news and just was a voice for the people that didn't have a voice and put him at terrible risk in situations. My son is, again, now he's 30, but it wasn't easy being in Indianapolis. It was but I always say, if you can make it here, you can make it anywhere. It's not if you can make it in LA, New York, or not. If you can make it in a place where the things are not going to be handed to you on a silver platter, the things have to be earned, and respect, or all those things that are just kind of like handed out and given in other places. And I have to say in Indiana, those are things that have to be earned, unfortunately. I know that things are changing. We are changing as a community and of a people to do things differently now, and it's time. There's no mistakes on what's going on in our world. But when I came back here, I was had been gotten engaged and whatnot, thinking again things would change, but still operating from that broken place. And remember that broken place stemmed from abandonment, and then the abandonment, then there are all those other things of unworthiness, and you got the abuse and molestation. And while I was in LA, I made the poor choices in men and went out on dates. Gentleman picked me up in LA and kept me. He had to go by his house, he said, to pick up his wallet, and invited me in. And he kept me there for 3 days. He said, And he was coming on very aggressively and very strong. And he said, if he went over to the phone, and he picked up the phone and he says, if he has to fight for it, he's going to call up his boys and gang rape me. So I had dealt with so much pain that again, that I suppressed, so I've got all these things of like, but I'm a survivor, I'm good, but suppressing it, and then being scared. I can't go to the police. And I said, for the first time in my life, as I replayed that, it's like, I'd never want to hurt anyone, but the amount of pain that I had felt in just those 3 days, and then not being able to do anything about it because maybe, or perhaps the way people think back then is that maybe the way you were dressed, or the way that you carried yourself, and all these things, but it didn't give them permission to treat me the way that they did. But I just knew the feeling. I knew what to do, So again, when I ran back here and still was dealing with that root of hurt and pain, and it really, Brittany, wasn't until I met a good friend of mine. I call her my sister, Christy. She said there's a new church coming in town. It was literally going to be about a couple blocks from my house. And I said, okay, I'm going to go. I'm going to go to this new opening and of this church being started. So I went to the church, and do you ever feel like when you're at church and you're like, they're preaching and they're preaching and teaching, and I'm like, okay, it's freaking me out because they're speaking directly to me. Did my girlfriend tell them my story? I mean, they're speaking to me. I mean, I feel like there was a divine light that was just, it was like, I was like, oh my gosh. I said, I was overwhelmed. And the first lady and the pastor, prayed over everybody that was there. And the first lady came up to me and spoke some things into my ear. And I'm like, I was just overwhelmed. I was overwhelmed with the whole experience. I never felt that ever in my life. And after that service, I said to my girlfriend, I said, did you share my story with them? I mean, they were speaking to me. It was just like, I just couldn't believe it. And she's like, no, I would never do that I'd never do that to them. Well, I started going to this church and becoming great friends with the pastor and the first lady. And again, I was still hurting behind closed doors. I was doing the things that I had to do as a mother, as a single parent. You're working and you're doing the things, but then behind closed doors, you just have those meltdowns. I would go to Bible study, and I would literally look at the pastor and the first lady's lips. So I would hang on. When I tell you, I was hanging on to every word that they said, and I immediately applied what they were talking about. And I've read the Bible. I've read the Bible. We all know the Bible.
One thing when you know it, but it's another thing when you apply it and it transforms your heart and your life and your whole perspective. Yes. Like oh my goodness. The transformation can be real though when you really apply.
It was insane, Brittany, because literally I was just like, I remember watching, and I'm like, okay, I'm doing it. And when whatever they were whether it was a sermon on forgiveness, and I'm like, I forgave everybody, and they gave me a forgiveness prayer, and I'm just thinking to myself, I forgave everybody. It's like, but I'll never miss an opportunity to pray. I'm on my knees. I said, God, please bring anybody's name to my remembrance that I need to forgive. And meanwhile, I'm thinking I forgave them, but I hadn't released it from my mouth. I had not released, and I'm like, God will bring those people's names to your remembrance. God will show up and he will bring those names. And I'm like, oh my goodness, yes, I forgive them. I forgive them. But meanwhile, all these things, I don't know if anybody has gone to the Great Banquet. Did you?
Yes, I was like the youngest one there, and that changed my life.
Wow. I agree. I agree. My granddaughter's over there. I can't even tell you. It was, I kept saying, here's the thing. I was supposed to go to the Great Banquet. Christy signed me up. My girlfriend moved to Dallas. I couldn't do one of the dates because I was traveling. I couldn't do the next date because I was traveling. So you're talking like going into about a year and a half later. So I'm like, please put me down on the next one. So I put it on my calendar. They're like, oh man, well, you're gonna have to get re-sponsored. I said, well, my sponsor's not here. This is how great God is. And I said, well, my sponsor's not here, but I had that email, girl. I pulled up that email. Oh, computer error. computer error, you know what, you could come, you can come. I didn't know why I was going, but I knew whatever God was going to release in me was from there, for there.
Yeah.
I was going to get it there, where he was going to impart whatever. Girl, I got to the great banquet. And when I tell you, it was the second day, and we're not going to share anything about the great banquet. It's about love, and
Yeah.
anybody that can go.
Yeah.
Okay,
Sign up.
go with your
Sign up.
sister.
If you're in Indiana, great
Men,
banquet.
yes, get men go with men, women, young people. But I'm just telling you, it's not about religion. It's about relationship, and it's about love. So go. So second day, I'm like waiting, and I'm feeling the love of God, girl. And when I tell you, it was an overwhelming gut feeling.
Mm.
It was like, and the word, girl, was forgive myself. I have been
Oh
forgiven,
my
everybody.
goodness, that is the
Yes,
praise. That is the
yes,
praise you will feel. Oh my god.
yes.
That's that feeling where it was really me that I had to like let go.
Let go.
That is
Yeah,
that is it. That is it. Forgive
yes.
yourself.
Crying, just booing, hit the floor. When I tell you freedom, freedom was forgiving myself. Girl,
Wow.
ladies, we got to forgive ourselves. We forgive everybody else, but we never forgive ourselves, or we're the last one. It's the most obvious, right? But we don't do it. And I'm just like,
We're so hard on ourselves.
oh my
Stuff in the
goodness.
past, like
Yes.
you should have known. You didn't have to choose, and then it's something about it just comes to ourselves. It gets hard. It gets hard to do.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. And so I was like, yeah. So, again, coming here and meeting with that pastor and first lady, and just hanging on to the word and applying it. I think that, that word is like, it's one thing hearing it, it's another thing. When you apply it, his word will not come back void.
Yeah.
It can't happen. It's like you cannot do it and not have a different result.
Yeah.
I always say, I always tell God to remove people from me that are not of you. When I sit there and I tell you that it's the journey is real. The journey is real, and it's like it's a constant evolving. It's constantly growing, and yeah, I just thank God. It's just crazy when He's in it and doing
Yes.
things.
So
Yeah,
so how did you talk about the application part? So you kind of touched on it already, but just to go back to the traumatic events, how did you overcome those problems and push through, and still remain hopeful that you were going to come out of it some way
yeah.
somehow? How did you?
It's like I went through the School of Kingdom Ministry, and we all have the same. I always tell people, it was a constant searching for love, and the love that was already in me, but I didn't know it. And that's the love of Christ, the love of God, right? But it wasn't until I tapped into the power and authority that God has given me,
Yeah.
the power and authority that God has given all of us equally. It's whether we tap in and use it. I always say it's that gut feeling, it's that intuition, it's the street sense, whatever it is, pay attention. He's the comforter. And it's like when I started being led from that spirit,
Yeah.
um, it was God, it's a God thing. It's like literally to know who He is and whose I am. And it's work. It's like, repeating that soundtrack, right? Repeating the soundtrack that I was hearing, the negative thoughts, and you're not worthy. What makes you think you're going to do that? With, I know I am whole, I am healed, I am,
And
purpose, I am His. It's,
connections. Yeah.
yeah, and you're repeating that with everything that the enemy's saying negatively. You sit there and say, if he says you're not worthy, I know I am worthy. Immediately
Yeah.
stop it in its tracks. Don't let it process in that soundtrack. Rebuke it, right? In the name of Jesus, and keep it moving. And it's not to say that life is going to get easier, because it doesn't when we're following Christ, because the attacks are real, and especially when the anointing, and we all have a gifting and an anointing on everyone's life, and everyone has a purpose to serve and to help others, brothers and sisters out. And that's what we are here for. It's only then that we can really see the shifting and changings in our life, but it's literally tapping into that spirit within. It's a God thing. I said, I don't want my life to make man sense anymore. Make God sense all day long because he's ridiculous. He's awesome. He's ridiculous awesome. Yes.
To
Yeah.
affirm yourself while in it, that can be so tough because you hear this all day of all the negative and like the soundtrack you were referring to, but to really say out loud and speak against those things,
Hmm.
that it's so powerful in itself and it's necessary. It's like really necessary, because the text, like you said,